This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you once again by the GSMC Podcast Network. I hope you all had a good Christmas. My name is Jeff Malinoff, as always, your host, and with me is no one, because Mark won the trivia game last week, so I'm by myself today. He's got the rest of the week off, basically tomorrow, and that's it. Well, today and tomorrow, and that's it. Makes sense. But fortunately for me, I have plenty to talk about today. We got the NBA Christmas games, especially the Lakers and Warriors. We'll get on that. And then we're going to talk about the NFL games and playoff scenarios. Then we're going to talk about some bowl games, especially the Cheez-It Bowl, or what some people refer to as the Trash Bowl, which, if you watch the game, makes sense to you. And I'll explain why it's called the Trash Bowl later. And then also we'll talk about some NHL standings, too, while we're at it, and see who's on top of their divisions, and as well as who, if they will stay on top of their divisions. That'll be the final segment. So we'll get right into it. NBA games. First off, we got to talk about, like I said, Warriors and Lakers happen on Christmas Day on Tuesday, and then the Lakers did extremely well against the defending NBA champions, and this may have been a LeBron revenge game. I'm not sure what the motivation was. Maybe it was just playing the Warriors. But, man, the Lakers dominated this entire game, in my opinion. 127-101 was the final score. Even though LeBron James left the game in the third quarter with a supposed groin injury, he got an MRI and no tear. He's still on day-to-day. He had 17 points, 13 rebounds, and 5 assists. He had almost a triple-double going into the half. And it's really impressive as he get into the third quarter, he couldn't finish off the triple-double, which honestly I thought he probably could have done. But in one half, he was on fire. So it was very good for them. And that was basically all the team needed, because the rest of the team really stepped up and took over after LeBron left with the groin injury. And man, there was some very questionable play by the Warriors, but looking back at the Lakers, like Kuzma had 19 points, Zubac had 18 points, 11 rebounds, he had double-double himself. Rondo off the bench, 15 points, 10 assists. Stevenson even had 11 points. And the thing is, what I saw about this game, the Lakers were shooting threes almost at nausea. That was like their go-to. They need, we've been saying on this podcast, they need to get better at the 3-point line. And I think they really stepped up when it came to the 3-point line. That's how I saw it as. And looking at overall, their 3-point percentage was 39%, 13 threes out of 30. I know they shot 33 of them, but 13 threes is pretty darn good with this Lakers team that is one of their flaws has been their 3-point shooting. So I think it's pretty great that they really upped it. And then looking at the Warriors, man, 9 of 36 from threes, only 25%. That's so unlike the Warriors. And even more than that, Steph Curry had 15 points, and that's it. 5 assists. In a very un-Stephen Curry-like game, Klay Thompson had 5 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists. These guys all played over 30 minutes of playtime as well. And see, I don't know if it's cause for concern or not, but Iguodala off the bench had 23 points himself. Played 27 minutes, played a very long time for he's been getting more and more minutes. Kevin Durant had 21 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists, so almost triple-double for him. But this was a very this is not the Warriors we're used to seeing that have been just dominating, not just this season, but just over the last couple of years. And I don't know if this is a sign of like maybe these two will meet each other in the Western Conference Finals or the first round, second round, who knows? But I don't know. This is a huge win for the Lakers, obviously. Even without LeBron in the fourth quarter, this team really battled, and this team kept that lead to a high amount. I mean, 26 points win over the defending champions is huge, regardless when it is, especially Christmas, which is prime time. That is like Thanksgiving for the NFL. NBA's got Christmas. That was their huge, biggest game of the year type thing before the finals and before the playoffs. And the Lakers won it, which was huge. There were other games that happened. There was a lot of games that happened on Christmas. I mean, was Christmas after all. And another two potentially dominant teams in the Eastern Conference was 76ers and Celtics. The Celtics won this one, 121-114. And Jimmy Butler had a pretty good game, 24 points, 4 assists, 5 rebounds. And Embiid had 34 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists. Another dominant performance by him, but it wasn't enough as Kyrie Irving just went off. I mean, 40 points, 10 rebounds. He almost couldn't miss. I know he went 17 at 33, but he really put the team on his back and really carried this team to the victory for sure. And now the question is, like, everyone's saying, is he gone after this season with the Celtics? Well, to me, I think if they win or at least get to the finals this season, I don't think he'll leave. But they need to be successful in this playoffs in order to keep him. I think that's what a lot of people are saying. But again, like Tatum had 23 points, 10 rebounds. There were multiple double-doubles for this team. But man, Kyrie Irving, 40 points, 10 rebounds, really put the team on his back and really carried them to this victory in overtime. And it was basically Embiid versus Irving with 76ers and Celtic players. Like, this was a great game to watch. A lot of scoring, obviously. And the NBA, we've been used to that in the NBA now, high-scoring games. Like, 121-114 is like, that's the average almost now. You know what I mean? Like, it's pretty surreal. Usually it's like, 102-98, that's a high-scoring game. That's nothing compared to what we're seeing nowadays. Scoring is a huge part of the NBA now. And getting up there in the high 100s, like the 120s and 130s, is not uncommon anymore. It used to be uncommon, but now everyone's averaging like over 100 points a game. Like it's almost that's the usual. That's the norm. And I think that's better for the NBA because people love high-scoring games and love seeing these baskets go in and the high dunks and three-pointers. And yeah, it's just great to see these well over 100-point games. And then there was another one that was both teams went over 100. I mean, Rockets and Thunder. Rockets won that one 113-109 on Christmas. And Paul George, 28-14. Westbrook, 21-9-9, almost a triple-double for him. He's been not giving us triple-doubles as he used to, but he's still playing at a high level, still a top 10 player, no doubt. And then there's James Harden. Well, Eric Gordon had a pretty good game himself, 17 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists. But Harden, again, with 41 points, 6 rebounds, 7 assists, he's still playing at a high level on offense. But he did shoot 5 of 16 from 3. So he shot a lot from 3, scoring 5 of them. But still, 41 points is... And then Capella had 23 rebounds. I'm sorry, when you have 15 rebounds or more, that's a great game. And then Austin Rivers coming off the bench, like he was like everyone's like, where is he going to go after this trade with the Suns? And all of this led to the he went back to the not back, but he went to the Rockets. 10 points, 2 rebounds, pretty good debut, all things considered, off the bench. Finishing up the NBA Christmas games, we had the Bucks beat the Knicks 109-95. And then speaking of like all these great teams and playoff contending teams, then we have the Knicks, the 9 and how many else losses? The 9-win Knicks team just get handled by probably the future. I think that they can be the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference if the Raptors slip up the Bucks with Giannis getting 30 points, 14 rebounds. Just, again, my pick for MVP so far this year is Giannis. I mean, he has just been borderline unstoppable down low. And on defensive side, no jokes. He had like 2 blocks, 4 steals himself. And he's just maybe the best all-around player in the NBA right now when you think about it, because he's playing great on defense as well as offense. You can't deny his production with the Bucks. And right now he's my pick for MVP. And I know some people think, oh, Kawhi Leonard should be MVP or others should be MVP. But honestly, Giannis is my pick for the MVP. As for the Knicks, there's really not much to talk about. I mean, Hardaway Jr. had 14-10. And, I mean, I can't really think of anything else of note. Knox had 21 points himself. But the Knicks are meant to be well, not meant to be, but they just are a poor team. That's just how it is. 9 wins speaks for itself. And they are still hoping for Durant to come along next season, free agency. They're still hoping for these major pickups in an offseason, which could happen. They have the money to do that. But honestly, I don't really see it happening. I understand New York's a huge market. I get that. But talent-wise, it's going to be very difficult to bring in high-end talent to come play with these other guys. Because I don't see a lot of potential in this team, regardless if Durant comes or anyone else comes. But, again, I think it's not about the team. Like LeBron James is a perfect example. It's not about the team and how they play. It's the market. LeBron went to L.A. for the market, for Hollywood, for those that potential you get playing in a high-end market instead of Cleveland. And Durant going from Golden State, Oakland, now moving to San Francisco in the new arena, to New York, where he'll be the guy, might benefit him more in the long run. But we will see. There's a lot of potential where he goes. He might stay in Golden State. He might go to New York, but he might be going to other places too. So we will see definitely where he will end up going into next season. And then we had one more game of Christmas. We had the Jazz beating the Portland Trailblazers 117-96. Both teams were looking good going into this season, especially the Jazz. And the Trailblazers were at one time first place in the conference, and now are like looking at the bottom almost. They are sixth place in the conference, and going from how good they were to sixth, 19-15. I mean, yeah, that's a big struggle, but maybe hopefully they'll hang on to a playoff spot by season's end. And as for the Jazz, they're still trying to find their identity this season. And going into the season, like everyone's like, oh, this team could be a top 3 team in the NBA. Now they're really on the outside looking in with a losing record of 17-18. But again, I'm not ruling out the Jazz yet. Season's still pretty early, and we'll see. Donovan Mitchell had 19 points still, so he's starting to get back into the swing of things. Maybe he'll become the guy again for Utah, so we'll see. Damian Lillard had 20 points, 5 rebounds. It was actually funny. My brother was doing daily fantasy with basketball. He was like saying Iguodala's name was Iguana, which I thought was hilarious. And he kept just trying to get all these names right that he's never seen before, or just reading them off, I guess. And he just kept getting them wrong. And I was like, "That's." And then literally was Lillard. I'm like, "That's Lillard." And it was just very funny. And then he just goes, "You know what? What about LeBron?" Or like he said it stupidly. He said like LeBron, or I forgot how he said it. He said it really sarcastically wrong, but I thought it was pretty funny overall how he was saying a bunch of these names in his daily fantasy, and Iguodala was my favorite one because he thought it said Iguana, and I'm like, that looks nothing. He's like, it looks like Iguana. That looks nothing like Iguana. I kind of get it that he doesn't want to try to guess that name. That is a pretty long name, all things considered, but come on, man. Anyways, there were some other games yesterday, too. The Nuggets losing to the Spurs was probably one of the biggest ones, 111-103. And, I mean, Jokic had 4 points, 4 rebounds, 10 assists. Very unlike him in the rebound department, but 10 assists, pretty good for the center, all things considered. But overall, I would definitely say that the Nuggets, I don't think this will affect them much. I mean, DeMar DeRozan had another great game, 30 points. He's really stepped up for them. And then Aldridge had 27 points. But they need more than DeRozan and Aldridge. I mean, this team is still going to be a low seed at best, in my opinion. Just because of all the, like, there's no Duncan, there's no Ginobili, there's no Parker anymore. Like, it's over for them. And Denver used to be the 1 seed. Now losing 2 straight, they lose that first seed to Golden State. And everyone's like, oh, Raul's right with the world again, as Golden State is now number 1 in the conference. Shocking nobody, by the way. But the games today, they're just like Trailblazers and Warriors, Celtics, Rockets, Lakers, Kings, Knicks, Bucks, and 76ers, Jazz. So it's all pretty just straightforward games. But how I see the season going is it's basically going to be how the conferences look right now. Warriors on top, Raptors on top, and everyone is trying to fight for other spots. So we'll see how those go, but we are going to take a short break. When we get back, we'll be talking about the NFL and reading into the NFL playoffs that are going to be on the line for a lot of teams in Week 17. But speaking of reading, sometimes you can't really have the time to read, but what would it look like if we all listen more? Listening to audiobooks inspires us, motivates us, even brings us closer, and there's no better place to listen than Audible. Audible has the largest selection of audiobooks on the planet, and now Audible members get more than ever before. Each month they get 3 titles of their choice, 1 audiobook, 2 Audible originals, and a fitness programs they can't get anywhere else. There's never been a better time to experience Audible. Try it free for 30 days by visiting audible.com/GSMC book or by texting the code GSMC book to 500500. Remember, if you want to try it free for 30 days, go to audible.com/GSMC book or by texting the code GSMC book to 500500.
What happens to your decision-making when you drink? Well, after 1 drink, you feel confident. A few more, and calling your ex at 1 a.m. seems like a great idea. And you're pretty sure the secret to a great taco is 4-day-old macaroni. The bottom line, drunk you doesn't make great decisions. So you're risking a DUI or worse if you count on him to get you home. Plan before you party. Get home safe. Brought to you by Washington.
Welcome back, everyone, to the GSMC Sports Podcast. We finished talking about the NBA roundup for the Christmas games. Now let's go to the NFL because we had a very interesting Week 16 for sure. We'll start off with where should we start, kids? Anyways, we should start. Maybe let's go to Cleveland. Excuse me. We will go with the battle for Ohio as Hugh Jackson returns to Cleveland once again to face his former team he coached this year. And shocker, they lose again. Hugh Jackson's team, that is. Cincinnati loses to Cleveland 26-18. Baker Mayfield, 284 yards on 3 touchdowns. Pretty good game for him, all things considered. But Nick Chubb with 112 yards himself. Unfortunately, no rushing touchdowns for him. But he still got the job done on the ground, that's for sure. But I would say that maybe getting rid of Hugh Jackson was the best thing to happen to Cleveland. Because now they did win, which was all they could do. But all of the scenarios that had to happen didn't happen for them as they are officially eliminated from the playoffs. But I will say that next season looks extremely bright for Cleveland. They have a young team, very talented team. And I would assume head coaches are probably chomping at the bit to be a part of that organization because of the talent that's on the field. And with Baker Mayfield playing great, Nick Chubb at the running back, young defense with Myles Garrett and Jabril Peppers and Denzel Ward, this team looks like a team that could be great in the future, especially next season. They could make the playoffs next season. It wouldn't shock me. And they might even take the division. The AFC North is still up for grabs next season, in my opinion. Like, it's not, it's still going to the Steelers. No, this could be wide open for the Cleveland Browns to take the AFC North for the first time since maybe that first time since they've been back since 1999. Because the last time they made the playoffs in 2002, they were a wild card team, not a division team. And they lost that wildcard game, ironically, to the Pittsburgh Steelers in a great game, if you want to look back on that one. But I do have to say, Cleveland might be looking good going into next season for sure. As for Cincinnati, I'm not 100% sure on that one. I mean, obviously they're moving on from Andy Dalton, possibly, but it would not surprise me if they did. And just overall, I think this team isn't officially, well, maybe not officially, but I think they are definitely in a rebuilding period at this time. I mean, after all the years of Marvin Lewis losing playoff game after playoff game after playoff game after playoff game, never winning one, he is the second longest tenure of a head coach in the NFL as of right now, behind, of course, Bill Belichick. And he still hasn't won a playoff game, compared to Belichick, who's won over 20 and has 5 Super Bowls to his name. So, obviously, Marvin Lewis has had opportunities to win in the playoffs, but still hasn't gotten the job done. Which makes me wonder, was extending Marvin Lewis the right choice? Is it time to fire him? I think Cincinnati fans will say it was time to fire him 5 years ago. And honestly, I don't blame them. Because you've had opportunity after opportunity with talented teams with the Bengals, and you still can't win a playoff game. I can't imagine going to the playoffs almost every other year, or every single year for that matter, and just not making the playoffs. Or not winning a playoff game. Not one. How is that possible? I personally don't see how that can be even fathomable. But the Bengals surprised me, Marvin Lewis surprised me, and they managed to go since 1990 of winning the playoffs? In the playoffs, at least? Because, the whole 90s was just the Bungles era, and then they come back in, 2003 with Carson Palmer and start playing great, and they look to the middle of 2010 to be a serious contender for the Super Bowl. Then Carson Palmer gets injured in one of the first plays of the playoff game against Pittsburgh, ironically, again, a Pittsburgh team, affecting a team in Ohio. But overall, I would say that the Marvin Lewis era, though they made the playoffs, not winning one, I would say, would be a failure. I really do. And I don't think he's going to win one with this organization. I think after his extension, or maybe even before his extension ends next season, that his coaching career with Cincinnati will be officially over. And there is also talks of Hugh Jackson taking over, which I have no idea why you want that. I know that the organization loves him. They're head over heels for him. Marvin Lewis loves him. But I don't know. The failure that man has at the head coaching position, and the failure you've had once putting him as the special assistant regional manager or the assistant to the regional manager of Dunder Mifflin, Cincinnati Bengals, is really I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't touch Hugh Jackson with a 10-foot pole at this one if I'm looking for a head coach. But the Bengals are the Bungles. They might bungle this one again, shockingly. But as for the Patriots, we're going to just move on. Patriots and Bills. Patriots, surprisingly, I'm using that in quotations, win 24-12 to Buffalo. They officially clinch the division as well as a playoff spot. And this surprises legitimately no one. They have 10 wins. New England's looking for a first-round bye. But I think the thing mainly people are looking at is this team does not look too good. This team looks pretty weak comparing them to other great Patriot teams. This might be one of the worst Patriot teams Belichick's ever had, and it's a serious worry. I don't see them making the Super Bowl. Maybe not even to the AFC title game. If they can't get past, if they make it a bye week, I don't think the divisional round in Foxborough will be in the benefit to them. I think there's still a lot of very talented teams in the AFC. Texans are still fighting for a spot in the first round, despite losing to Philadelphia. We'll get on that one a little bit. But they're still fighting for that last playoff spot. And right now, the Patriots just don't look as the same as they used to be. So I would say it's a cause for concern. Definitely a cause for concern. As for the Texans, we'll just go right into that one. Nick Foles, again, is doing... he's going to do it again, isn't he? That's what every time I was watching him play against the Texans, a very good defensive team. And Nick Foles went 35 of 49 for 471 yards, 4 touchdowns and only 1 pick, sacked once. And to me, I was like, he's going to do it again, isn't he? He's got to do this again. He's bringing this team back from the brink of death and going to make the playoffs. They still have a chance to make the playoffs. They're 8-7 if they win, and Minnesota loses, they're in, because Minnesota really has their own destiny in their hands, because Minnesota is technically in that last wildcard spot while Philadelphia is on the outside looking in. And, of course, you also have to look at the fact that every other team has clinched a spot in the NFC playoffs. So, really, the Vikings, or the Eagles, that matter, need to win, and they had to have the Vikings lose to the Bears next week to take that playoff spot. And if Nick Foles does this again, which he probably is going to, does that mean Carson Wentz's era in Philadelphia is over? And what can they get for him in a trade? Multiple first-round picks? Probably. But we will see. And I would think if Nick Foles does this again, if he takes them to the playoffs and even doesn't even just make the Super Bowl, he just gets them maybe a 1 win in the playoffs, wouldn't that make him their guy? Wouldn't that be the franchise quarterback for the future? I would personally think so. I mean, the records and the performances speak for themselves. But again, it's one of those things where Nick Foles has had a full season as starting quarterback multiple times and has not delivered like this. Maybe you need to hold him off until the end of this, like halfway through the season, and then put him in, or 3 weeks before the season ends and then put him in. Who knows? Maybe that's his specialty. But as for the Eagles, they can still make the playoffs and surprise a lot of people, and Nick Foles can do this again. I know last season they were 11 wins in, right now 12 wins going into the week 17 and then winning their last game. Maybe it was just 13 wins. Oh, it was 13-2 going into week 17, then that weird game against Dallas. But this is a little different. This last game really means something, and they're playing a very weak Washington team that has lost so much momentum after losing Alex Smith with that gruesome leg injury. And speaking of the Redskins, they played the Titans. 25-16 was the final score. Titans took that one. Not a lot to say about this game. I mean, Josh Johnson, again, had 153 yards and a touchdown. Well, he had 2 picks, but still, it's pretty decent for him, all things considered. Marcus Mariota kind of got injured halfway through the game, and Blaine Gabbert. It was Blaine Gabbert versus Josh Johnson in this game at the end of the game. Let's think about that for a second. Did anyone think it would be Blaine Gabbert facing Josh Johnson in a quarterback matchup with any team in any game this season? No. And I mean, with Gabbert, he threw 11 passes, completed 7 of them, 101 yards and touchdown. So he played relatively well. And Derrick Henry has been just on a roll, 84 yards and a touchdown. Not the games he's had recently, but still a positive note that maybe this guy's the real deal. Who knows? This might hugely benefit Derrick Henry in the future when it comes to whenever he's a free agent. But he's playing extremely well, no question about it. And for the Redskins, this is just a lost season. Actually, at the end of that game, Josh Norman tried to get into a fight with one of the linemen who gave him a little arrow shot taunt, which I thought was pretty funny, and he threw his helmet at him. Josh Norman did. And honestly, if he was going to confront a lineman, or the dude is huge. The dude was like a foot taller than Josh Norman. Does Norman think he's going to beat him up? Because I don't think he's going to beat him up. There's no way he's going to beat him up. No chance. So Norman is just like, he's like the kid that's like, he's Scrappy Doo. Oh my gosh, he's totally Scrappy Doo from Scooby Doo. You know what I'm talking about? The little dog's like, put him up, and then everyone's like, get away, you moron. That's Josh Norman in this situation against the lineman from Tennessee. Like, that dude would pound him to shreds. Come on. Anyways, moving on. We had another interesting matchup. The Bears still fighting for a first-round bye. They still have a chance to get a first-round bye. But they had a pretty scrappy matchup against the 49ers, who are probably one of the best, worst teams. It's weird to say, like, they have a horrible record of 4-11, but still are playing competitively against great teams. I mean, this game was pretty scrappy, to say the least. 14-9 was the final score. Bears win, still have a chance to make the playoffs. Trubinsky had 246 yards, 25 of 29, so near perfect for him. 1 touchdown. He's playing pretty well. Nick Mullins himself had 241 yards, no touchdowns, but a pick. And I don't know. There was a fight in this game that kind of broke out, and Richard Sherman was defending one of his players. It was a little late of a hit on Trubinsky, but he didn't lead with his helmet. He kind of put his arms out, tried to not make. I think he was already going at it, and there was kind of a scuffle. He was the guy that hit Trubinsky was on the sideline of the Bears. They were all kind of surrounding him, and Sherman jumped in there and started throwing some hands, and some other players threw some hands too. But Sherman was the main one. He got ejected from that game. But that was like the biggest story of that for sure. Is he was just protecting one of his teammates, and you got to respect that. Like, it wasn't him trying to pick a fight; he was just backing up his teammates. And then you had probably the biggest game, the most important game of the week, between the Seahawks and Chiefs. Both teams looking for a playoffs. Both teams looking to make room in the playoffs. I mean, Seahawks still needed to clinch at this moment, and the Chiefs are still looking to hold on to a first-round bye. But Seahawks claim a playoff bid as they beat the Chiefs 38-31, and losing Kareem Hunt still looks like it's put a huge effect on this team. Even though Williams had 103 yards rushing, Mahomes 273 with 3 touchdowns, and still a great season for Mahomes. Arguably going to be the MVP, him or Drew Brees, but it might go to Drew Brees just based off legacy alone, and him never winning MVP might take that into consideration. But I will say the Seahawks also extended Pete Carroll to the 2021 season, where he will be 70 years old as the head coach going into that 2021 season. So definitely something to think about. But Seahawks make the playoffs. People thought they could be at the bottom of the basement of the NFC West this season, or like 8-8. I think people said at best they could be. But they clinched the playoff spot. But again, there's also the 49ers getting Jimmy Garoppolo back next season, looking to improve. With over $58 million in cap space, and also the Cardinals are probably at the bottom of the basement of the NFC West, but competing in the NFC West is going to be challenging with the Rams and 49ers coming back up into relevance if they nail free agency and nail the draft they have the second overall pick. And we'll talk about how they got this. So they were 4 last week, and I'll tell you how they got to second coming up, but. Speaking of teams with a high draft pick, the Jets played the Packers, and they were up by 15 points going into the end of that game. And Aaron Rodgers decided to just be Aaron Rodgers randomly in one of the most pointless games of the season, as he makes a astounding comeback for his team as they win in overtime 44-38. And Aaron Rodgers has Aaron Rodgers numbers, 442 yards and 2 touchdowns. And I don't know where that came from. I don't know why. Like, it was like he wanted to know that he's still Aaron Rodgers, but it was pointless because this game had no meaning. But again, every player says on a team that's doing bad, every game has meaning. But people were like saying, "Oh, he's becoming this great Aaron Rodgers quarterback again," but he's carrying the team. But he should have been there 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago when they needed wins to get into the playoffs, which is understandable, no doubt about it. But overall, I will say that he definitely needs to get better at his timing. And for the Jets, they are still number 3 pick in the NFL draft. They are looking fun going in. They have their quarterback in Sam Darnold, who had a great game. I predicted on the fantasy football podcast last week that he would have a great game, and he had 341 yards and 3 touchdowns. He had a pretty great game. So I was sort of right. I said he was getting the most points of any quarterback. Of course, I didn't expect Nick Foles to throw for 470 yards. So, pardon me. Anyways, moving on. As for the Panthers, the poor Panthers, 6-2, looked like a serious contender. They just lost their 7th straight game. 6-9 as of right now, and the Panthers just looked awful. Even with Christian McCaffrey playing unbelievable football, 77 yards receiving, 101 yards rushing, carrying the team on offensively. And this was without Cam Newton, as there was 2 different quarterbacks, Heineke and Allen, both played in games. It was a special moment for Heineke, as he had a feel-good story about his Old Dominion quarterback and his father passing away. And then he's starting in his first NFL game. He had 3 interceptions, true, but overall I will say that it's a bittersweet moment because he struggled at the end of there and got injured in his elbow. But Falcons win this game and really means nothing. They're both out of the playoffs. Matt Ryan threw for 3 touchdowns on 15 completions, so pretty good for him overall. Hill, the running back, 115 yards rushing. Pretty good for him also. Calvin Ridley, 90 yards and a touchdown. And Calvin Ridley might get like he's one of the top rookies, and he's the top wide receiver rookie in the NFL at the moment. So good for him. And moving on to one of the most interesting games, surprisingly competitive games, Indianapolis and New York, as Indianapolis won this one 28-27. Manning had 309 yards. And a touchdown and a pick. Andrew Luck with 2 touchdowns himself and a pick, but 357 yards passing. And T.Y. Hilton played another T.Y. Hilton-like game, 138 yards on 7 receptions. So this was a very back-and-forth game, as you can tell, 28-27. And overall, this game was very good to watch, very fun game to watch. And the Colts still have an opportunity in the playoffs. I don't believe they've clinched yet. I will check my notes here. And no, as checking right now, they do not officially have a clinch spot in the playoffs as of right now. The Titans are 9-6, just like them, and we'll see how that turns up because they're the Titans are the 9-6 team outside looking in at the moment. But we are going to take another short break because we got to talk about Audible, and there is no better place to listen for audiobooks than Audible. Audible has the largest selection of audiobooks on the planet, and now Audible members get more than ever before. Each month they get 3 titles of their choice. 1 audiobook, 2 Audible originals you can't get anywhere but Audible, and fitness programs also exclusive to Audible and can't get anywhere else. There's never been a better time to experience Audible. Try it free for 30 days by visiting audible.com/GSMCbook or by texting the code GSMCbook to 500-500. Once again, you want to get this 30-day trial and try Audible, go to audible.com/GSMCbook or by texting the code GSMCbook to 500-500.
What happens to your decision-making when you drink? Well, after 1 drink, you feel confident. A few more, and calling your ex at 1 a.m. seems like a great idea. And you're pretty sure the secret to a great taco is 4-day-old macaroni. The bottom line, drunk you doesn't make great decisions. So you're risking a DUI or worse if you count on him to get you home. Plan before you party. Get home safe. Brought to you by...
Welcome back, everyone, to the GSMC Sports Podcast. We're finishing up our NFL Roundup for Week 16. We'll talk about some games that really had no meaning. Jaguars and Dolphins. Jaguars take Dolphins out of the playoffs with this win, 17-7. And there was 2 different quarterbacks in this one. Cody Kessler, and then it goes to Blake Bortles returning after a little injury. And he goes 5-6 for 39 yards. So the return of Blake Bortles I'm just kidding. It's probably not going to be anything big. And then Ryan Tannehill with 146 and a touchdown and a pick. And there is rumors that more likely that Tannehill is not going to return as the starting quarterback for the Miami Dolphins. It looks like that era in the Dolphins quarterback is over, as they're probably going to look for a new one in the draft. But speaking of that, Herbert, the Oregon quarterback, has decided not to go with the draft where he would have been projected as a top quarterback. He's got to wait until 2020. So that is a cause for concern, in my opinion, for definitely a couple of draft teams like the Dolphins looking to get a quarterback. So definitely a bummer for the Dolphins and other teams, maybe even the Jaguars, who knows. But that game ended with a 17-7 victory. Nothing too exciting there. Vikings beat the Lions 27-9. Still holding on to that final spot in the playoffs. Kirk Cousins, 21-28, 253, 3 touchdowns in that game to seal it. Calvin Rudolph had 122 yards rushing, and overall 22 yards rushing, receiving. Oof, I'm still getting over Christmas. Sorry, everybody. And basically that game really had nothing big about it either. And then a game that kind of had, actually a lot of writing on it. Ravens and Chargers, both playoff teams as of right now. Ravens really stepped it up, 22-10 on Saturday against the Chargers. Lamar Jackson with 204 yards passing and 1 touchdown, but he also had 39 yards rushing himself, and Gus Edwards 92 yards rushing himself. And the defense played extremely well. Gordon was held to only 41 yards rushing, and Rivers was held to under 200 yards and 2 interceptions. So is that a bad sign for the Chargers, or is that a bad sign or a great sign for the Ravens? Who knows what's going to happen? Because as of right now, both teams are in the playoffs in their own. The 4th seed wild card spot goes to the Ravens, and the Chargers have a 5th seed as of right now, still trying to get that first round bye and the winning of the AFC West, because that is still up for grabs. But if the season ended right now, Chargers and Ravens would have to play each other again in the wild card. And it would be in Baltimore, so that would be something. Definitely something. There are still 2 more spots in the playoffs that have not been clinched in the AFC. As for the NFC, only 1 spot remains for the wild card spot, and that's the Vikings spot, and the Eagles are the only ones that can really clinch. Titans and Steelers still have a chance to clinch themselves, but those are long shots also. Well, except for the Titans. The Steelers are probably the longest shot of them all. But moving on, we already talked about those games, and then we are going to talk about Buccaneers and Cowboys. Cowboys clinched the NFC East with a 27-20 victory over Tampa Bay. Winston with 336 yards and a touchdown. Still a lot of good passing yards, a lot through the air, but not enough on the point market. And when it matters, as Cowboys take this one, and Ezekiel Elliott with 85 yards rushing, no touchdowns himself, and Prescott with 161 and a touchdown. And he had 1 rushing, 1 passing, so that was good for him. 14 points total he brought for them. There was also a touchdown by the linebacker Smith, which was pretty cool, which put them over the top basically in that matter. And overall, I will say that, yeah, the Cowboys are in the playoffs. They clinched the NFC East, but I don't see them getting far. I think they just took advantage of a very weak division, and that's my personal opinion, and I'm going to stick to it. And then we got the Monday night game. Actually, I missed one, Steelers-Saints. And then I missed the Rams and Cardinals. Rams, I will just briefly talk about the Rams and Cardinals. 31-9, destruction, not surprising anybody. Cardinals still hold the number 1 overall pick in the draft. C.J. Anderson is the story, though. 167 yards and a touchdown for him. And this is his start because Todd Gurley was hurt. And, well, he had a little bit of an injury, and they didn't want to risk putting him in and risking further injury, which is a smart way to go. And C.J. Anderson really just showed up and played extremely well for the Rams as they destroyed the Cardinals 31-9. No big deal whatsoever for the Rams. It's just another day in the office. And as for the Steelers and Saints, Steelers did lose this game 31-28. Saints still playing like the best team in football, arguably. Breeze playing MVP-like season, 326 yards and a touchdown, playing great. No surprise to anyone. Kamara and Ingram both under 40 yards rushing, though, which is very unlike them, but they both had 3 touchdowns total. Michael Thomas playing unbelievable, 109 yards and a touchdown himself. And even though the Steelers lost, they still have an opportunity to make the playoffs. Long shot, though, definitely. But the fact remains that the Saints are still one of the top seeds, first round bye, first seed at the moment, which won't surprise anyone. But going on to Monday night now. Broncos and Raiders. Raiders won this game 27-14 in a very shocking destruction of Denver. Case Keenum had 2 touchdowns, but he also threw 2 costly picks. And Derek Carr, only 167 yards passing, no touchdowns. And just this game was all Raiders. He had Doug Martin, 107 yards and 1 touchdown. But This cost them the second overall pick. They were at number 2, and they dropped to number 4 due to this win over the Broncos. And I will tell you the order of the draft as it follows because of what happened in Week 16. Number 1, shockingly, is the Cardinals. I say that ironically because it's not shocking. San Francisco moves from number 4 to number 2 with their loss to the Bears. Jets stay at number 3. And the reason the Niners go up is due to strength of schedule. And Oakland has number 4. Detroit with number 5 at 5-10. Tampa Bay with 6. Buffalo and New York are tied with the 7th pick. The Giants, that is. And if that happens, if that continues to after the next week, they will get a coin flip. So you get number 7 and number 8. Jacksonville, number 9. And Atlanta will get the number 10 pick. And the rest goes as follows. Number 11, Carolina. 12, Denver. 13, Cincinnati. 14, Green Bay. 15, Miami. 16, Washington. 17, Cleveland. 18, Philadelphia if they lose and they don't make the playoffs. 19, Pittsburgh. And 20, Tennessee for those 3 teams that if they don't make the playoffs. So, and as for the Raiders, his first-round picks, they traded for Khalil Mack they traded Khalil Mack and Amari Cooper for those first-round picks. They will, right now, would get the 25th pick in the draft because of Dallas winning their division. And the Bears draft pick, which, if they get that bye, will move them to at least the 27th pick in the draft. So, basically, they traded first-round picks that would be closer to the second round than early. So, that's a bummer for the Raiders as they got the worst of the results. And as for the mock draft is concerned, Nick Bosa is still going number 1. Quinnen Williams out of the defensive tackle out of Alabama will go 2. Ed Oliver 3. And so on and so forth. But that is all the games that happen. Next week is going to be this week's 17 matchups we'll talk about when it comes to tomorrow on Friday. And we will take another short break. But once we return, we will be talking about some bowl games and NHL standings and other things that need to be talked about, all those nips, tips, quips that need to be discussed on the final segment of the day. So we will get right on that when we return.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back, everyone, to the GSMC Sports Podcast, our final segment of the day. We talked about the NBA, we talked about the NFL. Now let's go to the bowl games, because there was one game in particular that everyone's calling the Trash Bowl, but it was actually the Cheez-It Bowl, which is probably the oddest name out of all of these so far. I believe this is the first Cheez-It Bowl. And how this game ended was a 10-7 victory for TCU. 9 interceptions total. 9. And that is just saying something. It was ended by a last-second field goal for TCU as they pull off the victory. There were 2 different quarterbacks for California, Garbers and Forrest. They both threw together combined 5 interceptions. As for the TCU Horned Frogs, their quarterback, which last name I cannot pronounce, Muchalicine? I don't remember what they were saying during the game, but he threw for 27 yards and 4 interceptions. That may be the worst I've ever seen, even comparing to Nathan Peterman, all things considered. But the quarterback for Garbers and Forrest both threw for 71 and 93 respectively. All three quarterback ratings were just put the poop emoji on the quarterback ratings for each one. But 5 interceptions total for Cal, 4 interceptions on one guy, 7 for 20, 27 yards passing, 4 interceptions. That may be the worst game anyone can actually have. As for the running back for TCU, he ran for 194 yards and a touchdown, which carried that team to the victory they had. And there's just really nothing much to say about that other than it was called the Trash Bowl, and people had a field day with it on social media and Twitter and all that good stuff. And then other games that have happened yesterday and this weekend, Minnesota crushed Georgia Tech 34-10. That's all you need to say about that. Louisiana Tech destroyed Hawaii in their own backyard at the Hawaii Bowl, 31-14. The bowl game for Georgia Tech, Minnesota was the Quick Lane Bowl. So just in case you're wondering, the Dollar General Bowl was won by Troy, 42-32. Army and the Armed Forces Bowl had tied for the biggest blowout in bowl game history with a 70-14 victory for Army over Houston. 70 points. That's a lot of points. Army finished the season 11-2. Great season for them all around. Wake Forest and Memphis in the Birmingham Bowl was something else, though. What I mean by that is there was trying to be a last-second field goal for Wake Forest at the end of the game because the game ended 37-34. And at the end of the game, there was there was first a field goal that was called timeout before he got to kick it. And at the end of the game, it went down with a false start penalty, which the kicker, I believe, missed the field goal. And then he finally makes it after what felt like 20 minutes of just waiting. With the final seconds winding down, 37-34, Wake Forest with the victory. And then moving on, we had the 49-18 shellacking in Western Michigan by BYU. That happened on Friday. Florida National won on Friday as well, 35-32 over Toledo in the Bahamas Bowl. Famous Idaho Potato Bowl was the BYU and Western Michigan game. And the rest we've already covered. So let's move on to, we haven't talked about this at all on the sports podcast, but the NHL. We have some stands in the NHL that I think we should talk about because we're getting more and more invest into the season. I will tell you the division leaders of the NHL. The Jets lead the Central Division in front of the Predators, who won the President's Trophy last year, which is saying something. They have 50 points, the Jets do, so good on them. And as for the Blackhawks, they're at the bottom of the Central with 32 points and a 13-20 record. So the Blackhawks really have fallen off the face of the earth after their multiple Stanley Cup victories over the last couple of years. And as for the Pacific Division, we had the Golden Knights really take over the Pacific Division last season, their first season as a team, and they just dominated. They kept winning and winning and winning. Bad things injuries kept delaying them, and they kept winning. They got to the Stanley Cup final with their loss to the Washington Capitals, their first Stanley Cup ever for them. But a great season for their first season for the Las Vegas Golden Knights. But this season, they're still playing well, 20-15, 44 points. But this season right now is looking great for the Calgary Flames as they have 47 points, 22-12 record. I thought they came out of nowhere. They might have not surprised other people, but the Flames have been playing extremely well. First in the Pacific Division, Sharks are in the second place with 45 points. They were expected to be around that area as well. And it's not the Arizona Coyotes in last in the Pacific actually this year. It is the LA Kings with 31 points at 14-20 record. Pretty disappointing all around for them. But that is the Western area that needed to be discussed. As for the Eastern Division, the Atlantic, Tampa Bay Lightning, no surprise to anyone, 58 points, 28-7. They're first place in the Atlantic for a best team in the NHL at this moment. And it really is a surprise to no one just how good Lightning consistently have been over the last few years, and it just keeps on rolling with them. And as for the second best team in the NHL, they're also in the Atlantic Division, unfortunately for them. The Maple Leafs with 52 points, 25-10. This is arguably the best division in the world of hockey, as the Maple Leafs have 52 points. Buffalo Sabres have been having a great season, 47 points for them all around. And this really has been a great season with the Sabres, coming out of obscurity and trying to get into that playoff spot. They have 47 points. The Bruins with 44 points. The Canadiens with 43 points. A lot of these teams can still make the playoffs. And as for the Metropolitan Division, the Capitals, who are the defending champions, are on top with 47 points. But if the Maple Leafs or the Sabres were there, they would have their work cut out for them in the division. But the Blue Jackets are in second with 45 points. Penguins with 42. Islanders with 40. The Rangers with 36. Carolina Hurricanes with 35. Philadelphia with 34. And New Jersey, who was in the playoff last year, are at the bottom of the barrel with a 12-16 record and only 31 points. But and the Senators at the bottom of the Atlantic Division, and basically the worst team right now is the Chicago Blackhawks. But record-wise, you're looking at the Devils with 31 points, with the least amount of points-wise, that is. But I digress. Do I see this changing going into the playoffs for the NHL? Yes, I do. I don't see the Lightning losing their Atlantic Division, that is, but I do see the Maple Leafs and Sabres both making the playoffs. But as for the Metropolitan Division, honestly, I don't really see the Capitals holding on to their first place for that long. They might not win their division. I can see the Blue Jackets taking over, or the Penguins having to revitalize after not doing their three-peat last year. I can see them entering into the talk of the winner of the Metropolitan Division. And then the Islanders, I don't really see them. Basically, the main teams I see that have a shot to go, not only make the playoffs, but make it to the Stanley Cup, are in the Atlantic Division. Lightning, Maple Leafs, and Sabres are the three teams I feel like are the best right now in the East, and I think and they're all in the Atlantic Division, and I see that being the 30 teams to beat when it comes to the Eastern Conference. As for the Western Conference is concerned, Jets have been playing amazing with 50 points, like I said, but the Predators are only 4 points behind, but again, the Predators are coming off a President's Trophy victory, so this is kind of a lull season in all aspects when you look at it. But I see the Jets being one of the team to beat when it comes to the Western Conference. As for the Pacific, I see a lot to change here. I know the Flames are in first with 22-12. The Sharks are right behind them with 19-22 with 45 points. Golden Knights are right behind them also. But honestly, when I see the Pacific Division and seeing it right now, I don't see the Flames holding on to it. I see the Sharks or the Golden Knights taking it. I can see the Golden Knights repeating as Pacific Division champions, but I can see the Sharks are having that all-in year with a lot of old veterans. So and a lot of they're at the trade deadline. They've always made moves. I can see them doing that again. They have Evander Kane. They have Joe Thornton coming back, and I can see them definitely taking the Pacific Division first place. But again, the Golden Knights are still one of those young teams that just come out of nowhere, especially last year. They were expected to be bottom of the Pacific last year. Now they are one of the teams to beat in the entire NHL, so I could definitely see them taking the Pacific Division without question. But I digress. That is all the time we have today. Thank you so much for joining me. I will be here tomorrow by myself once again, but tune in for our football podcast and our basketball podcast that's also happening today and tomorrow. We have our football and fantasy football podcast. And as always, my name is Jeff Falanoff, and I will see you next time.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.